In the 1990s, Wesley Snipes was one of the highest-paid action stars in the world. Blade, Passenger 57, New Jack City, Demolition Man. He was a genuine box office draw, reportedly commanding somewhere between $10 and $15 million a film at his peak. By the accounting presented at his own trial, he earned nearly $40 million in just a stretch of 6 years. And then he stopped paying his taxes, on the advice of people he trusted. And by the end of it, he had served time in a federal prison and faced a tax bill that reportedly grew to more than $20 million. This is the story of how one of Hollywood's biggest stars learned the hardest lesson in money there is: you cannot out-earn the tax man, and the wrong advice can cost you everything. Here's what makes this one different and worth your time. Wesley Snipes didn't go broke on mansions or cars or a runaway lifestyle. The usual suspects in these stories. His money didn't disappear slowly. It was walked straight into a wall, deliberately, following a theory that sounded convincing and was completely wrong. And the people who sold him that theory weren't back-alley con men. They were advisors with confident answers and official-looking paperwork. By the end of this video, you'll understand exactly how a very intelligent, very successful man talked himself into a decision that cost him his freedom and a fortune, and why the most dangerous money advice is the kind that comes with total certainty. First, the scale of what he built was substantial. Wesley Snipes broke through in the late 1980s, and through the 1990s, became one of the most bankable action stars in Hollywood. He headlined the Blade trilogy, films that reportedly grossed well over $400 million worldwide, and helped prove that a comic book movie could carry a franchise years before that became the industry's whole business model. He reportedly earned in the range of $13 million for one Blade film and $15 million for another. Across New Jack City, Passenger 57, Demolition Man, White Men Can't Jump, and dozens more, he was a reliable draw for the better part of a decade. When his tax case later went to court, an IRS agent testified to the raw numbers. By the government's own accounting, Snipes earned almost $38 million in the years from 1999 through 2004 alone. This was, by any measure, a large and legitimately earned fortune. This is exactly what makes the next part so striking. Because it wasn't bad luck or a market crash that took it apart. It was a decision. Around the turn of the 2000s, Wesley Snipes became involved with a group of tax advisors who promoted a theory sometimes called the 861 argument. The details are technical, but the claim at its heart was simple, seductive, and false. That under a particular reading of the tax code, most Americans were not actually legally required to pay federal income tax on their domestic earnings. It is the kind of idea that sounds almost plausible when it's delivered with enough confidence and enough paperwork. And the men promoting it were confident, and they had plenty of paperwork. Persuaded by that argument, Snipes stopped filing federal tax returns. And it went further than simply not paying. According to the federal indictment, his advisors prepared and filed amended returns on his behalf that fraudulently claimed refunds on taxes he had already paid, seeking back nearly $12 million the government had legitimately collected. Understand what's going on here, because it's the whole lesson in miniature. Snipes didn't forget to pay, and he didn't hide money in some offshore island. He was persuaded by people he was paying for advice that the bill didn't apply to him. That is the most expensive kind of wrong there is. Not a mistake you make, but one you're confidently sold. The trouble with a decision like that is that it compounds silently for years before anyone sends a bill. Every year Snipes didn't file. The underlying tax he owed didn't vanish. It sat there, quietly accruing penalties for failure to file and failure to pay, plus interest stacking on top of both. This is the part almost nobody feels until it's too late. An unpaid tax bill is not a static number. It grows. A few years of ignoring it can reportedly double what you owe, because the penalties and the interest compound against you the entire time. So while Wesley Snipes was still working, still earning, still very much a wealthy man on the surface, an obligation was silently swelling in the background. And unlike a business creditor, this one had the full power of the federal government behind it. There would be no negotiating it down to pennies later, no walking away. The longer the theory went untested, the larger the eventual reckoning became. He wasn't getting away with it. He was accumulating interest on it. In 2006, the federal government indicted him. The case went to trial in 2008, and it's worth being precise about the outcome because the headlines blurred it. Wesley Snipes was acquitted of the most serious charges: the felony tax fraud and conspiracy counts. He was convicted only on 3 misdemeanor counts of willful failure to file a tax return. But even those misdemeanors carried real weight. He was sentenced to 3 years in federal prison, reportedly the maximum available, and he served roughly 28 months before his release in 2013. Think about that image for a moment. One of the biggest action stars of the previous decade. This man had earned tens of millions of dollars, walking into a federal prison over unpaid taxes, and the financial reckoning outlasted the prison term. The back taxes, penalties, and interest reportedly climbed to somewhere around $23 million. He would spend years afterward locked in negotiations with the IRS over how much of it he could possibly settle. An offer of roughly $9.5 million reportedly on the table at one point, a fraction of it countered. The courts largely sided with the government. The fortune wasn't spent. It was surrendered, dollar by dollar, to a bill he'd been told he never had to pay. But this story doesn't end in the prison, and that matters, because Wesley Snipes did something hard. He came back. After his release, he went back to work. Steadily, without drama, taking roles, rebuilding his reputation one film at a time. The same slow grind you'd recognize from other comeback stories on this channel. And then, in 2024, came the moment that closed the loop in the most public way possible. He returned to the big screen in Deadpool and Wolverine, reprising the role of Blade, the character that had defined his stardom, to a genuinely rapturous reaction from audiences who had grown up on those films. A man who had lost his fortune and his freedom to the worst financial advice imaginable walked back onto a Hollywood set decades later and was welcomed like the icon he always was. The money lesson is brutal, but the human story has a second act, and it's a good one. So here's what to carry out of it. And it comes in 2 parts. The first is the bluntest rule in all of personal finance. You cannot out-earn the tax man. It does not matter how large your income is. Taxes are not a bill you can outrun, out-argue, or out-earn, and any theory that tells you otherwise is going to be more expensive than just paying would ever have been. The tax bill is the one creditor that can take your freedom, and it never stops accruing while you wait. But the deeper lesson is about the advice. Wesley Snipes didn't wake up one day and decide to defy the government. He was persuaded by people he was paying, people who sounded certain, people with paperwork. And that is the quiet danger. The most costly financial decisions in your life will rarely feel reckless in the moment. They'll feel like expert guidance. So the real takeaway is this: whose hands you put your money in matters every bit as much as how much of it you make. Get the numbers right, pay what you owe, and be most careful precisely when someone confident is telling you the rules don't apply to you, because they always do. If this changed the way you think about who you trust with your money, that's exactly what this channel is for. The real stories behind the money and the lessons hiding inside them. Subscribe and stick around, because the next story is about a champion who earned a fortune with his own 2 hands and lost it to the people he trusted to protect it. You won't want to miss it.